Well, welcome back to Seeking Healing, Finding Hope. This is a podcast where we explore the roles of compassion, support, and professional help in overcoming shame and stigma in the recovery journey. I'm your host, Ian Madison. I'm the director of Peace Restored. We're a nonprofit organization that serves women impacted by a variety of difficult circumstances. Today, we're thrilled to continue our series on the topic of recovery with our guest, Justin White. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, Ann, for having me back. It's good to be back again.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who didn't see our other podcast, you might want to go back and check it out on the topic of stigma reduction. And Justin is a recovery minister at Mount Gilead Church and has served in the recovery community for over 10 years. He leads weekly support groups and that averages about 130 participants at his groups. But we're thrilled to have him join us this week. We're going to dive into our first discussion question for this podcast, which is, what steps can communities and society take to create a more inclusive and supportive environment for individuals in recovery?
We're starting off really small, right?
I know, right? I know. Let's just start with an easy topic, right?
Yeah, we'll start easy. Hit the easy button right at the beginning.
I mean, that's how we like to roll around here.
It's a fantastic question, and I'm glad you asked it. I know you have a heart for this. I do too. Like with so many big initiatives and important initiatives, I think it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of different angles here, but I think where communities can begin is really with awareness and education. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean that's true of any big project or something that's bigger than one town or one state or one family or one individual. It always begins with that education and awareness piece. Now, where I'm encouraged, and I think you would agree, I think we talked about this on the last episode, we're seeing more of that already.
Yes,
we're seeing that more in schools. You're seeing that more in media, even social media, which I'm not a huge fan of social media, but you're even seeing organizations and influencers really speak into social media. And that's great for young people.
Yeah, that's great.
Getting into the stigma like we talked about last time. But it can reduce stigma. It can promote understanding. The more we educate, more we become aware. Now, we also know that people are becoming aware of mental health challenges just because it's more prevalent. I heard somewhere that 2/3 of American households have some form of addiction present.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that is. In fact, it's been several years since I heard that. But let's just assume that's in the ballpark. That's a lot of people.
It is.
And the good news behind that is that it means that more and more people are willing to talk about and are willing to get help, because we both know addiction in particular, let alone other mental health challenges, addiction has a mind of its own, and it can become a massive problem very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of people have experienced dealing with that, and so that is actually a blessing in disguise. Right. Stigma starts to decrease because people just naturally are facing it.
Yep.
And have to wrestle with it, right? But then you also have just providing accessible resources like support groups in your town, counseling services, recovery programs. When all of those are working together, it makes a difference. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that communities can also create what we would call safe spaces, right? Where individuals who are struggling with some sort of mental health challenge feel accepted.
Right.
They're supported. They know I'm not the only one, right? Which is one of the reasons why a 12-step meeting is so powerful when you're trying to recover from that. But it goes beyond that, right? It gets into things like recovery-friendly workplaces, recovery-friendly housing environments, social activities. I saw it. We're right in the middle of summer, right? Dog days of summer are hitting. It's been brutally hot here where we are this week. And I saw a couple days ago, there's a whole recovery community going to go tubing down the river together, and it's for a good cause. And they're gonna have a picnic afterwards. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing, and it's. I guess my point is, it's more than a meeting. It's more than sitting in a circle, bearing your soul and crying together for an hour. No, we're going to go out and do
Because
things.
there's so many ways that we can do recovery work together.
Yes.
It's not about just the 12-step meeting. I think that's
Exactly.
when we think about inclusive, those are things that come to mind to me is how can we provide more opportunity and more ways?
Yes.
Instead of just saying there's just one path to recovery.
Right.
How do we
and
make it possible for everybody to be in that space of recovery?
Yes. And what if a town were to publicly sponsor, hey, on this Saturday in August at this particular public park, it's recovery day, and not just your drug addicts and alcoholics can come, the whole town can come.
Right.
And let's celebrate together in a alcohol-free environment. Summertime. And
so much of our celebration tends to circle around drinking or substance use, and we celebrate that with our celebrations. But I think to what you're saying is, what if we were able to celebrate and make it a recovery safe space?
That's right. Where everyone is included and feels comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah.
There's not the segregation. You guys go do your thing. We'll go do ours. That's that. In some ways, that's the antithesis of the definition of community.
Right.
Right. And so, the goal would be to create those safe spaces, to build awareness. But of course, it's all rooted in education.
It is, because I kind of keep thinking about, I was kind of imagining, like, we just had 4th of July not too long ago. And I thought, man, wouldn't that have been amazing to have like 4th of July celebration where you go and you can know that you can go to that event and not be worried about walking around a corner and being triggered by some type of substance use happening at that event. We can't control everybody's behaviors and habits, but if we create a space that's designed around just celebration, not celebration of the substance, but celebration of just the event, what's happening, family and community, that's a whole different ball game.
And I think towns and communities would find that it's actually easier to do that than you might think. And because this issue is so prevalent, I think people would rally around it, and it would be a positive.
Yep. I think it would be, and it would create healthier communities as well.
Yes.
I don't know. It's something for us to really figure out. How can we do that better as a community? I think it's a good question for all of us to wrestle with.
Yes.
How can we continue to make supportive environments for our communities and continue to have that grow? So those are some really great points as we're continuing to think through that. So I guess continuing the conversation is, how can we foster a culture of empathy and compassion and acceptance to support individuals on their journey towards healing and wholeness? That's another heavy question.
Massive, but it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. Again, it's rooted in education and awareness for sure. But let me also say this. I think we've got to start challenging and getting comfortable with challenging the misconceptions about what addiction is, about what good mental health is, what maybe poor or unhealthy mental health is, and just understand these are complex issues, right? And we're all trying to figure it out together. Let's show some grace to one another. I got to tell you, I've been in ministry for about 25 years now. And my addiction and struggle with mental health didn't come on until I was in my 30s. I need to repent for some of the thoughts I had, the words that I said to people who would come into my office seeking counsel for some mental health issue or alcoholism or whatever it is. And I just didn't get it, Ann.
Right. Yep.
I sat there as a pastor and I felt for them. Yeah. I wanted to help them, but because I hadn't gone through my addiction yet, I looked at the alcoholic and I said, well, why don't you just stop?
You didn't know what you didn't know.
Didn't know what I didn't know. And of course, one of the things I'm grateful for in the midst of battling addiction is that God changed my mind and He changed my heart. He changed my perspective. He changed me.
Yep.
In all of that.
You're able to see things you couldn't see before.
See things I couldn't see before. And we just have to keep bringing that to the surface, right? Challenge those misconceptions. Well, of course, He couldn't just stop. I've learned that.
Yeah.
Now, in my own journey, you can't just stop. But that was a misconception I had.
Yeah.
And so those of us that are in the space of recovery or mental health services, we have to help people see the other side of that. And I'm not saying throw it in people's faces or from a we know better than you or holier than thou, but just with compassion. Hey, there might be another way to think about this.
That's right. There may be another way to think about it. And I think that is a misconception that we just tell somebody if you just stop it or if you just tried harder. What we say around here all the time is like, if somebody just tries harder, does better, that would be over. And it's just not that simple.
Right.
We say that tongue in cheek. We don't really mean that somebody should just try harder, do better.
Yes.
Because it's not that easy.
Right.
It kind of reminded me too, there's an old Bob Newhart video. I don't know if you've ever seen this or not, but I'll kind of try to give the picture and maybe we can link it in the description so people can find it. But it just brings humor to what we're talking about. Because I think sometimes when we're talking about these hard things, it's good to bring some humor in to help us kind of break it up.
A must.
Yeah, because it can just feel very sterile. But there's an old Bob Newhart video, and he's done a scene of somebody coming in to ask for counseling. That asked for counseling. He's like, hey, I just want to let you know, I only charge $5, and it should only take about 5 minutes, and his is $1 a minute. And she's like, okay. But I only take cash. And he's like, sure, sounds great. And then she starts to tell her problem to Bob Newhart, the therapist. And as he gets done, he's like, okay, I'm going to tell you something, and it's going to, this is what I need you to do. And she's like, should I write it? And this is why I feel like most people can remember. It's just a couple of words. She's like, okay, go ahead. And he looks at her and just screams at her, stop it. And she's like, what do you mean? He just keeps repeating to her, just stop it.
Stop it. Yeah.
And she's like, what?
Right.
She goes, you're freaking me out. Like, what do you? And so it's just humorous because if it was just that easy, she would have stopped it, and so would we. And
we'd be out of a job, Ann.
That's right. I mean, wouldn't that be the dream if every time somebody said a problem, we just go, just stop it. And like, okay. Hi, I wanted to interrupt this episode to share a little bit with you about Peace Restored. I'm not sure if you're aware, but Peace Restored is a non-for-profit, and we rely on support from people just like you. Did you know that if you donate as little as $2 a month, it could provide curriculum for a woman that we provide mental health care to? Or $4 a month would help us provide mental health care for a woman just like yourself or someone that you care about. So if you would consider supporting us in our mission, please go to our website at peacerestored.net. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Right.
I'm done.
Right.
But it's not that simple because there's roots.
That's right.
We got to figure out the roots. And I think if we as a community don't recognize that and we just walk around everybody and keep saying, man, I wish they would just stop it, then we're never going to be able to figure out a way to have safe communities, healthy environments to where we can heal as a whole community, not just as individuals.
You made me think of something. Isn't that why a testimony is so important?
Yep.
Because when you hear somebody who's overcome an addiction or a mental health crisis, and they can share their experience of the fact that, you know what, I'm glad it didn't just stop.
Yep.
Because I learned something going through the fire.
Absolutely.
When I was in that jail cell, when I was in that rehab facility, when I had to spend nights by myself and I was in despair, like I grew through those moments. I don't want to go back to those moments, but I grew through those moments. And if I just said stop and it was gone,
that's right,
I wouldn't have grown.
Yep.
And I wouldn't have been pruned, and I wouldn't have been shaped and molded. There's beauty in going through the fire.
That's right.
But if people don't hear those stories, AA calls it strength, encouragement, and hope. If we're not sharing our strength, encouragement, and hope, how will we ever help people who haven't gone through those things really understand?
Right. That's what I tell people all the time that meet me, that know me on this side of the fence.
Yes.
I say, the person that you see in front of you today is not the person I was. Because if you had met me before, I couldn't do half the things that I do today.
That's right.
I was so filled with shame. And all the things that was holding me down, so much sadness. I could barely function. And people are like, I don't see that in you. I'm like, well, I'm glad, I'm grateful. But there was a lot that God had to walk me through and help me heal through. And I had to work and kind of really struggle through that pit to get to a place to where I am to have that wholeness.
Yes.
I'm not saying I'm perfected. I'm just saying I'm a new person.
Yes.
And I'm able to walk that out in a different way than I ever could.
Yes.
Before I had to go through that hard place. Because I think there's a benefit, because we don't always want to talk about the benefit of the hard.
Oh man.
But there is a benefit to that. And because we want to.
Can we do a whole podcast on that sometime?
We could.
I love that phrase you're using. The benefit of the hard.
Right. Because we as humans, we want to avoid the hard.
Yes.
And go, well, that's really, because we get to a point to the hard and we go, oh, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to go over here again.
Right. That's human nature.
It is.
Nobody wants to feel pain.
We don't.
Right. I remember when I was in rehab, and one of the therapists there said, "You all are going to want to go back to the old you." Mm-hmm. She said, "No, you don't. Mm-hmm. You really don't want to go back to the old you. The old you led you into addiction and into despair and into a life that wasn't healthy and that you didn't even enjoy." Mm-hmm. Right? No, you're going to go back home a new you, and start building the new you. And the new you only happens when we're honest about our pain.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know about you, but there's times when the old me comes back to the surface.
Oh, yes.
And when that happens, it stops me in my tracks. Mm-hmm. And it really, sometimes it catches me off guard because I don't know if it's complacency or just used to the new me. Mm-hmm. And when that old self comes back up, I'm just like, it takes me right back. And I'm like, okay, to me, that's an acknowledgement of there's still work to be done.
That's right.
It goes back to I'm not perfected. I'm just still working through the hard.
Yes.
And that's okay. And I think as people listen to us, hopefully they're saying like, oh, it's good to realize that even though these two people sitting on this podcast are talking about all these hard things, we're not saying we have everything all together. We're not like, look at me. I have all of my ducks in a row. Everything's perfect.
Please don't think
I
that.
I never have a problem. No depression here. It's not that. It's that we've made a conscious decision to stay working through the hard.
Yes.
And I think that's part of not only what we have to do as individuals, but what we have to do as a community, as a culture, to say, as I'm watching my friends, my family, those I love walking through recovery, I had to be willing to walk along that hard with them and not just to say that's a them versus us problem.
That's right.
So I think as we continue through this, it's like how, I lost my place. So this is where you'll get to edit. Gosh, we haven't given a lot of editing, so now you have more edit. I know. I know. Austin's like, So kind of going back to what we were talking about a little bit ago on the safe place kind of concept of as a community having a safe place. What are some maybe societal changes that we might want to, let me try that again. We were doing so good. Okay. So as we kind of continue our conversation and this idea of creating safe environments and making some changes in our communities, when we think about making changes in our society, what are some maybe what are things that we think are necessary to better support those struggling with addiction and mental health issues that we need to do maybe from a societal or even policy standpoint?
Great question. I love the fact that we're going to talk about this for a second, and understand like these are some of my thoughts and opinions. I think there's a lot of room here and a lot of grace for ideas and ingenuity. Let me say this. I think, first of all, we have to ensure that mental health and addiction treatment is accessible and affordable.
That's a big one.
It's massive, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I could go on and on about the people who have come to me ready to seek help, but just couldn't.
There's especially in our area right now, our statistics are really...
We're in a desert, aren't we?
We are. We're in what they call a health provider shortage area. Yes. And our ratios are bad. We're like 1 to 1,100.
Right.
And like you said, if we don't have the accessible care, when somebody's ready, what's going to happen?
That's right. It's a big enough leap for someone to get to that place where they're ready to receive care.
Yes.
Sometimes it takes some people years.
Yes.
Before they're really ready to address the issues. And then to find out, I can't because there's no provider in my area, or I've got to wait 6 months to get in to see somebody, and then it's going to cost me X, Y, or Z, and I got 3 kids, and I'm a single mom. How am I supposed to do that?
It feels impossible.
Yeah, which just let me just say this to you, Anna. You didn't ask me to do this, but this is one of the things I love about what you're doing with Peace Restored, because you have a heart for folks in that situation. And what you're doing is important. It's massive. It gets into this accessibility, affordability issue. We are seeing gains. I run operations for a small business in the health insurance industry. We are seeing gains from the major insurance carriers in the nation about mental health protection and services. We're just scratching the surface. It's not great yet, but I think in time it's going to grow. So we're with our conversations, we're trying to push for that. Let me say this too, and this I know gets a little bit edgy.
It's okay.
But I think it's important to just verbalize that another important policy change is decriminalizing addiction and focusing on treatment rather than punishment. You know, part of my story is that I had to spend 15 months behind bars in a state prison. I will tell you, this is not scientific, but I will tell you, while I was there, about 80% of the other male offenders that I was incarcerated with were not men that I would say were your quote unquote criminals.
Okay.
They were men with either a mental health challenge or an addiction, a substance use disorder. That either took them to places that they never thought they would be, doing something. Granted, criminal behavior, including mine. I'm not trying to make an excuse for it.
You're not justifying it.
Not justifying it. It is against the law. The acts that were committed. But at the root of it, about 80% was substance use related.
We have to do better.
Where many of the men there would have done much better in an alternative form of rehabilitation than spending months or even years in a 4x8 concrete cell. Is that the best we can do as a society? I don't think so.
No.
I know America has a ton of problems. I'm also glad to be an American. And I think we can do better. We have the resources available. So we need to have some serious conversations about decriminalizing addiction in our country. I will also tell you this. Currently, I'm on a committee through the state of Indiana that is trying to help families stay together. Dads connect with their children while dads are behind bars, right? So the idea is dad gets busted for dealing dope, or he does a series of criminal acts because he's under the influence, or he got caught up into something. Well, if they have kids, who's paying the price? Not only his dad, but also the kids and the mom back home. And so we're working. My point is, some conversations are being had at the state government level that are encouraging.
That is encouraging. And because I think if we don't make those changes, we're not only affecting that individual in recovery, we're creating systems of trauma within the family. And because, you separate that kid from that dad, all those things, it's not just an isolation that affects just that one person going through recovery, whether it's the dad or the mom or whoever in the family. It affects the family as a whole.
And then you talk about things like recidivism. If we can't help the man while he's incarcerated stay connected to his family and provide him the resources he needs while he's there for treatment and bettering himself, guess what? He's going to get home. He's going to get right back into the cycle of dysfunction, the wrong people, places, and things, and he's going to wind up right back there. As a society, we can do better.
One of the things I've been talking about recently is the idea of system disruptors. And so a lot of times we have systems that we've created in our culture, and we have those systems in place. And I think those systems do the work they've been created to do. But often it's difficult to change a system that's already been enacted. And so I like the idea of having system disruptors to where we can maybe have some different ways to provide care than what's already been done. Because I think sometimes it's better to have a system disruptor than sometimes the challenge of changing the system that's already moving forward.
That's right. Yeah. It's a lot easier to move a tugboat than a cruise ship, right?
Yep.
Cruise ship, it's just good. It takes time and energy, to your point.
Yep.
Those massive societal systems,
Yep.
they just are what they are.
They are.
Right. But what can we do to disrupt
and
create a new alternative?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. Let me also, I'll just say this as well. I think it's crucial to support workforce development.
Yes.
Provide job training, employment opportunities for those who are in recovery. If somebody battled drug addiction or even has a criminal record because of that, there has to be some way to help them get over the hump if they really want to.
That's right.
If they want to beat it, if they want the better life, if they realize, that old life, it just didn't work for me. I'm ready for something else. Well, if they're going to be turned away from a good job where they can provide for their family, what are they going to do? They're going to resort back to their old practices. Right.
If there's no other option.
Yes.
What option do you have?
Right. So stable employment can really, I think, significantly enhance somebody's recovery journey and overall well-being.
Yeah, 100%. There's no way we can help people continue to move forward if we don't build them a strong foundation.
That's right.
If we just say, we got to help them from the top up, we're going to just, fix, if you will, your recovery.
Right.
And we're going to fix your mental health. And that's all we're doing.
Yeah.
We're the foundation is weak and all that's going to crumble.
That's right.
And so workforce, all the things we're talking about, those are the foundational elements. And we have to make sure those are in a place to where the person can have that strong foundation to move forward.
That's right.
Because without that, we're just, what is the old saying? We're building our house on sand.
That's exactly right. It will fall.
It will.
Yeah.
And so we don't want that. We want to create generational stability, not generational trauma.
Yeah. And I think it's possible.
I do too.
I'm seeing movements. We're in a community right now where there is such a synergy between local service providers, amazing communication. There's not a day that passes that we're not in contact with somebody else in the area, another organization or an agency that is trying to make a difference. So I'm encouraged by that. And I think we're going to get there. We're going to make headway. Will it ever be perfect? No. But we're making progress.
That's right.
And I'm encouraged by it.
Perfect progress, as they call it. Yeah. Well, this has been another fun episode. I appreciate the conversation. I think we've had a great conversation and just continuing the idea of how can we continue to break through the stigma reduction in the areas of recovery and how can we improve our communities. It's really important. So thank you, Justin, for continuing the conversation today.
Appreciate it, Ann. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening to our podcast today of Seeking Healing, Finding Hope. Remember, creating a good supportive environment in our communities is important. If you want to learn more about how you can work in the recovery space to support those walking through recovery, please check out our series on Seeking Healing, Finding Hope. Until next time, take care, and I hope you tune back in. Thank you.